We are starting off the show tonight with some breaking news coming in right this minute. These developments coming in from Johannesburg, where the BRICS summit is underway. Reports say on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a conversation with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, this development has been confirmed by India's Foreign Secretary. The question is, what did the two leaders talk about? What was discussed? And reports say they apparently agreed to direct their officials to expedite the de-escalation process along the border. Prime Minister Modi further raised concerns over the unresolved issues at the LAC. Listen to this first.
On the sidelines of the BRICS summit, Prime Minister had interaction with other BRICS leaders. And in that conversation with President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister highlighted India's concerns at the unresolved issues along the LAC in the western sector of the India-China border areas. On the sidelines of the BRICS summit, Prime Minister had interaction with other BRICS leaders. And in that conversation with President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister highlighted India's concerns at the unresolved issues along the LAC in the western sector of the India-China border areas.
Now, remember, India and China remain locked in that tense border standoff. There have been attempts to ease those tensions, and just recently, India and China held the 19th round of military talks on resolving those issues. The two sides mutually agreed to not put new posts in close proximity to the LAC, and they also then agreed to identify specific limits of patrolling. And there has been no significant progress when it comes to Depsang and Demchok. Both sides have failed to make any significant progress. For more on the latest that's coming in, let's quickly go across to Siddhant Sibul, who has been monitoring those developments for us. Siddhant, what's the latest that you're gathering at this point? There has been a lot of speculation in the run-up to the BRICS summit over whether or not the two leaders will actually sit down for a bilateral meeting. But now we saw them interacting. It's an informal conversation, of course, that's happened. Tell us more about what that interaction was all about and what you're picking up at this point.
Well, Molly, there was no structured bilateral meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. This was expected as well. But what happened and what we saw on camera just before that press conference on expansion was a brief interaction between the Indian and the Chinese leaders, and that handshake after the press conference got over, after the announcement was made on the list of countries. Now, these are important moments given that how relationship between the two countries has fallen since the Galwan incident, since 2020 incident where the Chinese actions, the aggressive actions, the line of actual control led to the death of 20 Indian soldiers. Now, since then, there hasn't been any conversation in terms of the structured meeting, but this is the second such conversation which has happened on the sidelines of a summit where India has conveyed its concerns. The last such meeting happened in Bali, in Indonesia, just a few months ago in November of 2020, where we saw those visuals of both leaders interacting. And now, this time, the MEA confirming that conversations happened, concerns were raised. And what is significant is that the officials of the two countries will be directed by the leaders that there should be a de-escalation. How and when it happens is something that we will see in next few weeks.
Right. Stay with me, Siddhant. Let's also go straight across to Captain Alok Bansal, who's with us on the broadcast as well. Thanks very much for being here. If you can just share with us your initial reaction to what's unfolded at this point, the latest coming in from Johannesburg regarding that interaction that the two leaders have had and the implications of this as far as the situation on the ground is concerned.
It's a very positive development, and I think if BRICS has to move forward, then these two leaders have to interact. They have in the past shared a wonderful personal chemistry. Unfortunately, events of last few years have derailed the relations completely. So I think it's a good beginning because on the border, as I said, along the line of actual control, there have been tensions. Most of the issues have been resolved, but two outstanding issues have remained. And last military commanders meeting could not resolve that. So I think we will finally need a political will to resolve these pending issues. And I think the resolution of these issues is in the interest of both the countries, more so in the interest of China than, of course, India. But it is definitely in the interest of both the countries. China would not want to have India as an antagonistic power. And these two countries not being on the same page will derail BRICS to a very great extent. And India, on the other hand, is importing a huge amount of items from China. China is our largest trading partner. We would not want tensions on the borders. So I think it's a very, very positive development if we can take it forward and revert back to the spirit that was seen during Wuhan and subsequent meetings between the two leaders. It will be, I think, a good beginning.
Right. Let's also talk about where the process of easing those tensions really stands at this moment, with those 19 rounds of military talks having taken place, and also the larger objective, of course, has been to build greater confidence with each other.
See, as I said, most of the conflict areas which were on the northern bank of Pangong and other areas which have been resolved, I think as of now, whatever is the information available with me, I understand that there are only two issues that remain. One is Demchok, which is a recognized dispute between the two sides, and one is Depsang, where, of course, is the fresh dispute where Chinese have actually prevented Indians from patrolling up to the limit where they were patrolling earlier. So I think that's an issue which needs to be resolved. And I think once the political will is there, I think at military commanders level, it can be resolved easily. Unfortunately, in Chinese case, the military commanders don't have the latitude to resolve it bilaterally. So I think that's why it's been pending. I think it should get resolved if there is a political will between the two leaders.
Right. And Siddhant, let me also ask you this. The timing of this development is also very interesting and significant, coming ahead of the G20 summit, which is all set to take place in New Delhi next month.
Well, yes, it is significant given the fact that the joint statement is something that is much awaited. Will there be a joint statement after New Delhi G20 summit is the big focus so far. Let me tell you, there hasn't been any joint statement from various ministerial meetings which have happened in the past few months. The major issue has been the G7 versus Russia and China. On the other side, it is the mentioning of the Ukraine conflict in the joint statement, the two paras which hold the key to a joint statement. And will a personal chemistry between the two leaders pave way for a joint statement? We have to wait and watch. Next 2 weeks will be crucial. Before that, there will be the ASEAN meeting as well in Jakarta, where the Indian Prime Minister is traveling. There is no confirmation as to who represents China at the Jakarta meetings. Will Chinese President Xi Jinping travels to Jakarta is the big question. And if he travels, will there be again a conversation that can pave way for a diplomatic, essentially resolving the diplomatic crisis over the joint statement is the big focus.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much, Captain Alok Bansal and Siddhant Sibal, for joining us here on Gravitas and helping us better understand the implications of that interaction that the Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have had just a short while back in Johannesburg. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.